doing business in Beijing. The Prime Minister has begun his trade mission to China by saying he wants to double business between the countries within 5 years. But it's the more controversial issue of human rights which continues to dominate. David Cameron did raise it during talks with the Chinese Premier, but failed to discuss the plight of the jailed Nobel Prize winner. Well, let's take us straight to Beijing now. Our political correspondent Glenn O'Glasser is there. Evening, Glenn.
Jeremy, it's a little after 1 o'clock in the morning here in Beijing, and I expect David Cameron by now is catching up on some much-needed sleep after a long day of talks. Talks about trade, talks about the environment, and yes, talks about human rights. Just to warn you, my report does contain some flash photography.
Bringing a delegation of leaders of some of Britain's top 50 companies to China, David Cameron is here to drum up business with the world's second largest economy.
I want to connect Britain up with the fastest growing countries in the fastest growing parts of the world. So I'm proud that we brought a really big trade delegation here, bigger even than the one we took to India. Some of Britain's best known companies, best known names coming here to deepen and expand our trading and economic relationship with China.
Mr. Cameron's first stop here, a Tesco supermarket. It looks both familiar and strange. Tesco with a distinctly Chinese twist. The supermarket chain has 99 stores in China and plans to invest £2 billion here over the next 5 years. At a 600-year-old temple, Mr. Cameron took tea and learnt about a British council scheme to train Chinese social entrepreneurs. And his optimism was rewarded at a signing ceremony to agree a £750 million deal for Rolls Royce to supply engines to a Chinese airline.
But there are two big problems in dealing with China. First, the environment. This country produces more greenhouse gases than any other. Out of the 20 most polluted cities in the world, 16 are right here. And then there's the thorny issue of human rights.
The Chinese government is angry that jailed dissident Liu Xiaobo has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and is demanding a boycott of the awards ceremony. Britain has made it clear that the British ambassador will attend as usual.
One of the things about the UK-China relationship is it is at the very highest level. We have dialogues covering all of these areas, covering obviously the economic and business and trading relationships, but also covering environment and climate change, and also we have a dialogue covering human rights. And that's the way our relationship should work, that we should cover all of these issues in the proper way, and we do.
Meeting Chinese Premier Wen in the Great Hall of the People, David Cameron raised the issue. Premier Wen told him he welcomed a dialogue on human rights. Mr. Cameron is expected to ask specifically about Liu Xiaobo at further meetings with Premier Wen and China's President Hu. But he knows he needs to tread carefully, addressing the human rights issue in a way that will not jeopardize relations and increasing trade between Britain and China.
Then there's clearly widespread concern about this whole human rights issue, but the question of how they handled the obviously vexed issue of the Nobel Prize winner, is that getting in the way there, or are we seeing it as a bigger issue away from Beijing?
No, I think it's a big issue here, but I don't think it's getting in the way. I think, of course, there's a whole raft of human rights issues, not least Tibet, and also the Chinese backing for the Burmese regime, and all the other dissidents in jail, not just the Nobel Peace Prize winner. He is an important issue. David Cameron is expected to talk about him specifically with Premier Wen and with the Chinese President Hu, but I think it would be unfair to say it's getting in the way. I think from the Chinese side, they don't like being berated. It is a diplomatic tightrope you've got to walk when you talk human rights with the Chinese leadership. But I think as long as you discuss it discreetly and in private, they're not unwelcoming of it. And indeed, they put out noises suggesting they're welcoming the dialogue on human rights, which is unusual for the Chinese leadership. And so I don't think it's getting in the way. I think it is an important issue. But I think the main issue, of course, for these talks is trade. And I think that really is where the focus has been.